It's June 24th, 2021, and we're talking to Coach Pookar and Jungler RBM of AOE Esports about North American Amateur League of Legends. This is the True Sight Podcast. Welcome to the True Sight Podcast by Oracle's Elixir, your source for in-depth analytical coverage of professional League of Legends and amateur League of Legends and the rest of the esports world. I'm Tim Magic Sevenhusen, and this week we have two guests on the show, both from the North American Amateur Team Area of Effect. We have the team's coach, Pookar, and their jungler, RBM. Welcome, guys.
How you doing today, Tim?
I am doing well. Glad to have you both on. Glad to see both of your smiling faces. You're sitting back, enjoying some unfolding LCS, not an unfolding drama, but extensions of existing drama, news, all of that. And we're here, and we're not going to spend too much time focusing on that. We're here to talk about you guys and your role in amateur, what you do in the space, what your experiences are like playing. So I think a great place to start would be just letting everybody know a little bit more about you guys. You know, I chat with each of you a little bit now and then, and know a bit about you. But I'm sure a lot of people watching the show, you know, maybe they follow amateur, maybe they don't follow it very closely. Why don't we start by getting an introduction from you, Pookar? Kind of who are you? Where did you come from? What do you do in the space?
Yeah, so my name's Christopher Sam, also known as Pookar. I've been in the amateur scene for a couple of years now. Basically started in around 2016. And this year I've worked with RBM almost the entire season. Back on Zeus during the spring/winter, and then now we joined back up again for AOE Esports for Proving Grounds.
Cool. Good to have you here. And RBM, you want to give us a bit of a rundown?
Yeah, I'm Peyton Demarest. My game name is RBM. I was the jungler for Michigan State University for a long time. I did amateur before that. Then during CLOL I stopped, but I came back for Zeus Gaming last split and back on AOE this split.
Cool. And so what have you guys, you mentioned a little bit of your background, but like, Pookar, how did you like get into coaching and specifically in amateur? Like, what was the path that led you to what you've been doing this year?
Well, I mean, back in the day, I basically just reached out to a post on Zenith Esports, which was another amateur team back in the day. They're one of the veteran ones. Last year, they joined up with EGP basically to form their roster. But back in the day, I just responded to a post, and I got a little bit lucky where some unfortunate things happened with some of the other staff members, but I eventually ended up in a coaching role with some decent players. And I mean, basically after that, I took a break, but I joined back up with Deos, who was building a roster with Zenith as well. And we worked together for a few months. And basically, I mean, at that point, you're kind of, I don't want to say you're set in amateur, but once you're in, you're kind of like, you can get by on proving yourself that you kind of did your work in amateur, that you can get onto other teams and prove to players that you can keep going with that sort of thing.
Cool. Yeah, good to have you here. Present company accepted. Who are some of the kind of the best or most notable players you've worked with so far?
Well, my first mid laner, even back in 2016, was actually Sudsy, who played for Revival most recently, and basically him, Jurassic, I worked with very briefly a few months in 2017. And I worked with the Era's Drive for like a week back in the open qualifiers, but he was still pretty much only playing Janna and some enchanters back then. So it's kind of like it has been interesting to see his evolution, to say the least, even though I only worked for him very briefly.
Cool. RBM, what about yourself? What is kind of you mentioned a couple of the teams that you've been on before. Like, what's your League of Legends journey looked like? Depending how far back you want to go.
Yeah, I started a long time ago. I guess the first like real known teams that I played for, because I played for like random teams that like weren't really teams, but like I played on Azio back when Anu was Azio. I played on Azio Red with Ray. He's still playing Ray ADC. Mm-hmm. I played with him way back then. And then I played on Rats Evolved, which was that had Pocket Rhino and Dark Wings. and like a revolving door of top winners and oddness. So those teams were pretty OG. And then after that, I just played in collegiate with Dillaran. Takeover was on MSU this year too, the new TSM Academy mid-laner. So yeah, got to work with a few Smurfs.
Cool. At what point did you kind of get the idea that, hey, I could, move up into organized competitive play and maybe take a run at this? Like, was that something you always wanted to do, or is it something that kind of you realized at a certain point, hey, I think I might be good enough for this?
Well, kind of how that went was I I used to want to do that like a long time ago, but then I like got kind of old, right? Like now I'm 22. Last split I was like
So
21. Yeah, so like I kind of just gave up on it and I just played TFT all day. That's where like everyone calls me the TFT player, and I hadn't been playing League at all. And then Argento Sky and Azio reached out to me saying they needed a jungler really badly, and I was like, or I guess it was Anu was like, we need a jungler super bad, and I was like, I don't even play League. Why do you want me? So that's kind of how that went. Cause City Witty Nealer, I think that's what his name is now, but he like dropped out to go play with his friends on a different team, and it was like the day before roster locks for one of the tier 2s last split. So they were just like, yo, we need a jungler. And I was like, all right. So that's kind of how I got back into the scene. Was we were a little desperate.
Well, and it worked out okay, right? Because then that all the Anu stuff went down, and everybody kind of split off into their own things, and then you were part of then taking that Anu stuff and forming Zeus, right? So it was you and Alorum, and what was the rest of that roster last split?
Alorum, me, Darkwings, Raheen, and Pookar Rhino.
Right. Yeah, and so and you guys, I think you did pretty well for an amateur team. You definitely won some big series and some big games. I can't remember off the top of my head how far you got in Proving Grounds, and I think it wasn't the best showing, right?
No, we won the first round, and then the second round we had to play C9. Yeah. So that was a little unlucky on our bracket. And then we lost to GGS.
Yeah, but definitely had a decent share of success as well in the spring split. And now, some of those have moved forward. So you guys are now playing under the AOE banner. What led to you guys kind of joining the AOE organization in specific, or playing underneath that brand, and with the roster you have now? Maybe Pookar, you want to take that?
Yeah. So this off season, actually, well, I guess you could consider it in between the splits, was kind of like, I don't want to say stressful, but you had a lot of rosters that were basically coming together from scratch. Even though a lot of the rosters from spring were like already pretty decent teams, but like, for instance, we learned pretty quickly as a team that Zeus was probably not going to stick together, basically just for like personal reasons. Obviously, like Alorum, Tuesday, and Wiggly are like super old friends, so I mean they just wanted a chill season where they could perform and play together and basically have fun, but still be a pretty amazing team, because they're probably the best or second best team right now, depending on who you ask. So it's basically, in my head, when I was building the roster with some of the people involved with AOE, is like a lot of the options are just like our optimal roster in our head is like, okay, are these players going to join a different team? Are they not going to join a different team? So basically, this roster was built by AOE to compete in UPL with Trickster as a jungler, and obviously he's not allowed to play right now, so we just slotted RBM into that roster, and he was a good fit. I mean, Payton is a very vocal jungler, and he fits well with the combination of players we have right now. So
cool. And so the actual 5-man roster you guys have right now, do you want to just walk down kind of who the actual 5 players are, and maybe say a few words about them?
Yeah, so Faisal is our top laner. That's the way you'd like to pronounce that, as I've heard some interesting different choices on how to pronounce that on some broadcasts. It's Faisal. He basically, last year, I think he was an Olaf only player, but now he basically plays whatever champion I ask him to play. RBM is legendary Kazakh's one trick. Now he also plays everything I ask him to play.
I haven't seen the
except for a
Kazakhs in a
few.
little while.
Yeah, we actually could have
It's
pulled it
actually
out.
OP. It's
We
actually
could have
OP.
pulled it out last night, but we went with some different champion choices. Yeah, Dark Wings is obviously number 3 Mobalytics GG esports prospect.
And if it was up to me, he'd be higher.
Ooh,
It should be.
yeah. So he's been. I mean, he's actually been performing amazing this season, especially since we've been able to expand his champion choices. He's always been able to play these champions, but you know, in the spring, the meta just suited, you know, Orianna, Victor, Azir. So it's kind of like basically the way we had to win games is putting him on these champions, so that we had a chance to win. But he can play everything. Like he can play all the different champions, and I mean that's my point this season too, is to expand Darkwing's like exposure to, you know, people's opinions of him should be, you know, you can play anything. It's not just mages like Spring.
Yeah.
So Sketch Dreams is our AD carry. He draws Tristana ban every series. We're not allowed to play this champion, but he can play any AD carry. Do not risk it in draft, guys. And then we have Fizzy, who is he played for TSM in the spring briefly to sub in for Yerson before he came over.
Yep.
He also played collegiate at Illinois Wesleyan and Harrisburg, and he's been a pretty core member to getting up to level up to the point we are right now. So
yeah. And when Fizzy did play those games with TSM, you know, I thought there are definitely some areas that he still has to work on, I thought, but he had such an aggressive approach to things, and that's something that can be really beneficial, especially you know, at academy or amateur levels of play, just being able to go for things, and even if they don't always work out, being willing to pull the trigger and stuff, I think is always really impressive. So what has that been like as something that affects you? You know, often you see jungle and support as being engage roles depending on the meta, right, RBM, but having someone like him with his mentality and support, how does that work out between the two of you?
It's pretty good. I'm learning more and more how Fizzy wants to play the game, obviously, since like a lot of the teams that like started PG or this split like were like fresh, so it took me a while to like learn, because Rhino just did everything I said, but Fizzy has like his own like idea of the game, so it's like I need to like work with him to like figure it out, which I'm starting to do better. Like Fizzy wants to play a lot more controlled into aggression, whereas I just wanted to play aggression. I just like I'd fight anyone at any spot. So I learned how to do these setups properly and stuff like this to help Fizzy achieve what he wants to achieve, and then we can fight. So
yeah,
it's definitely been a nice change of pace too. I never had like a shot calling support.
From the coaching perspective, Pookar, when you have players coming in with these different approaches, like different tolerance levels for aggression or different, you know, thought processes for what conditions need to be in place to make a play or whatever it is, what kind of approach do you tend to take to finding kind of the synchronization between them?
yeah, I mean, it is pretty interesting because, as you said before, like RBM and Fizzy are both aggressive players, but the way they approach aggression is like the interesting distinction between them, because, you know, Peyton came from playing on the collegiate team where he was like basically the carry, and now he has other carries around him. So like we have to do a good job of matching like the way we approach aggression, and the way we synchronize that is just by playing together and introducing different communication tactics within the game to basically set off triggers in everyone's heads. So like, oh, this is what we have to do in order to make this play, or can we afford to make this play without this information, or we might lose the game if we do it. So
yeah. So do you tend to come in and like say, so here's how, like a more authoritarian style, like here's not with the negative connotations of that, but like here's the approach, and I need you to do this job within it, and I need you to do this job within it? Or do you try to more let people figure out their own balance themselves and just be there to kind of like bounce ideas off, things like that? Like what kind of approach do you tend to take?
I'm definitely a mix. Obviously, sometimes you need to be a little bit more direct with some of the approaches, but I think I'm confident in my players' decision making and like how they approach communication and in the game. that they can pretty much lead themselves in certain situations. Obviously, you're going to have situations where you need to kind of teach and say, "Hey, you guys aren't approaching this situation like you're supposed to." So we have to figure out why you aren't approaching it that way and make steps in the communication process that we can end up at that goal.
Yeah, okay. I think that's always a challenge for coaches coming in, is figuring out what style works best for them as a coach, and also what style is going to work for this set of players you have on your team, and negotiating all of that, right? And I'm sure that just comes with experience. Like, you've worked on a few different teams now. I'm sure you approach this a little differently than you have some other teams in the past, right?
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty decent example to compare this to Zeus Gaming, because basically the communication structure in Zeus was primarily RBM in the early game, and then Raheen and Alorum kind of in the mid to late game. But now we have like 4 very vocal players. So Fizzy's very vocal in the early and mid. RBM's always vocal throughout the game. Faisal is pretty communicative for a top laner, and then even Sketch Dreams is. I mean, a lot of AD carries are either really, really shot cally or really, really quiet. Right? There's a very distinct class of AD carries, and we're trying to open up Darkwings to be a little bit more communicative as well. But he's kind of quiet right now, so.
Yeah, I can definitely think of players who fit both of the modes you're talking about that I've heard comms in. Either don't say anything at all, or shot calling from the bot lane position, which always seems interesting because you can have the perspective from the outside that the more mechanically intensive and the amount of clicking necessary to do the role really effectively, like say jungle would often be more of a cerebral role in developing good pathing, whereas bot lane, I think you can have the perspective that you got to click on exactly the right spots all the time and as quickly as possible. So the less talking you have to do, the better. But that's not really the case. And it's huge oversimplifications, of course. So, RBM, in your case, being a communicator like you are, is that more of a personality thing, or is it something that you think you've developed that fits your play style? Or
I think it definitely stems from personality, but the main thing, for me and in my case, was in collegiate, all my teammates weren't very good. At the start of collegiate, so I knew I had to talk a lot if we're gonna win, because they don't understand the game as well as I understand the game. So that's kind of where it started, to where I had to communicate a lot, because we're just the boys gathering up to play League. It wasn't a scholarship school or anything.
Yeah. How well did you guys end up doing, by the way? How far did you get in collegiate?
The last year before the COVID year, we were top 8. We went to LA, and then this year we were top 16, I think, because Takeover had to go back to Korea, so we played with 2 top winners. We had one of our top winners playing mid, and the other top winner just playing top.
And did you have some coaching present within that?
Yeah, it was Argentum Sky and Incon, the assistant coach for Zeus, and now the coach for AOE Randoms. They're both from MSU, so there are 2 coaches.
A lot of connections flowing between it all.
Yeah, and before that we had Kilponian. Shout out to him. He was the OG. I love that guy.
So speaking of AOE Randoms, so you guys do have a sister team, and I think most people would look at the names on there and say hey, there's a main team and kind of a more developmental team. Is that the way you guys look at it?
I mean,
you go.
You want to? Okay. It is interesting to call. I would definitely consider these 2 teams more like sister teams, but we also we have separate staff and separate managers, and we sometimes scrim together, but it's not such a connected organization structure where we're constantly trade strategies with each other, because we still have to compete against each other. And obviously, as luck has it, we've had to play against them twice in 2 tournaments already. So we're still super friendly with all of our former teammates. So even on Zeus, we're super friendly with them. And then Incon, who's on Randoms now, is we're friendly with him. So it's nothing. It's competitive, right? It's just competitive friendliness, and we're pretty equal teams. I'd say we're around 5-6 each in terms of ranks amongst all the amateur teams, depending on the day you play. But
yeah, and that's interesting, because I think at least given the amount of experience I have following the amateur scene and looking at the names and just familiarity of the players on the two teams, I think most people would look at, seeing Dark Wings, seeing Fizzy, seeing RBM, and just saying based on these names, you'd expect this team to be better, right? But so what is it on randoms that is they've actually taken both series off you guys at this point, right?
Oh, we beat them yesterday.
Did you beat them yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay, so they took the first game, and then I didn't watch the rest of the series, so
we took
I just
game
assumed
one,
you were
and then they
doomed. I
took
guess.
game two.
Was that it?
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, we got like kind of stomped game two. That's probably why he thought I was stupid.
I was clearly paying more attention to other series, but so you have been closely matched at the very least, right? What is it about the players that they put together that have made this such a closely matched kind of rivalry between you? Like who are the standouts there that we should be paying attention to?
I mean, their bot lane has been playing together as a unit basically for years. Like Short Hop and Pockets have been on a few different teams together throughout the years, and they just have like a synergy to where like they know how to lose lane, they know how to win lane, and they are like consistent. So they'll reach the mid to late game on a relatively same basis on every game, right? No matter who they're playing against, they might go down a little bit, they might go up a little bit depending on the opponents, but their roster is built in a way where it's consistent and it will get them to the mid to late game in the same spot almost every game, right? So when they're built like that, it's kind of like they know how to absorb pressure of some of the teams that are more aggressive, and especially at the amateur level, that aggression is not always the most calculated or the most targeted in the right spot. So they can definitely they can slow the game down. They have really, really good counter plays and reactive plays to the aggression. And once they have a tendency to pick compositions that work well together because of their synergies within the team, and then they can just hit the late game and they're really good together. That's the simple part of their team, is that they have a lot of synergy, and their Short Hop is an amazing late game player. He's classically a Caitlyn, Ashe, and even Vayne player. So if you let any of those champions get to the late game without contesting them, or if they can slow the game down, then they're just going to start winning fights.
So it sounds like they have a bit of the profile of a well-coached kind of a team is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Incon's been smurfing the split. He's worked really hard to improve from Zeus, and then another player is like turbo good as Leo. The guy's like a beast. He's like the only mid so far that's been able to like almost match Dark Wings that we played against. Like Dark Wings usually just stumps everyone, but Leo has been like performing for sure. So I'll give a shout out to him. But you hit the nail on the head. It's just
cool.
Short Hop played with Pockets forever, and he played with Chim forever too. So they have like a lot of built-in synergy.
Sounds good. Who are some of the other teams? Like if you guys would kind of rate yourselves in randoms around kind of that 5-6 kind of rank area, who are some of the teams that you guys feel you're chasing that are kind of at the top of the amateur level? Because I think last split, obviously the way we saw it play out, you had No Org, you had Zeus, you had a couple other out there, Barrage, that were kind of the big boys in the amateur scene that everybody was kind of trying to chase and that were rivaling the academy teams and so on. Who's kind of that upper echelon this split, RBM, from your perspective?
Zeus is still really, really good. Alarm in amateur is just cheating. That guy's crazy good. Wildcard Red, Arrow in amateur is cheating. And Resolve is still good. I think that's what the new Barrage sponsor is. Resolve, yeah, they're good. I think Array is crazy good. And then other than that, it's like just us and randoms come up after that, I think. I don't know who I'm missing on 4 that you have on 4, but
Evil Geniuses is like around our level, I think, Peyton.
We stomped them. You're so fake, Pookar.
Listen to the analysts, man. They know what they're talking about.
They got 2-0'd last tournament, but they improved a lot since then, and they will improve a lot because they have like EG coaching staff and like their systems in place. Peter Dunn, that guy's a genius. So they'll be better than us eventually, maybe. We'll see.
Who out of the kind of the LCS backed teams, so we've got Evil Geniuses, Prodigies. They've got a lot of names that continued from last split. A little bit of change because obviously Danny moved up to LCS, so Shoryu's back is down playing. They brought in Skytech, so they're a team that I think people are paying attention to. Are any of the other LCS backed amateur teams kind of on that radar, or like people that you kind of look over your shoulder at and go, we should pay attention to them? Like, is C9 Amateur coming up on you? What about 100 Teams Next, teams like that?
No, they're all pretty bad. Like C9's getting better, but and I think they can improve, but yeah, I think all of them are pretty bad. 100X would have been better if they picked me though. Just saying.
Pookar, looking at those teams though, it's not only just about at this level how good the team is overall, right? Obviously, it's really about finding the individual players who can stand out enough to try to earn an academy spot and kind of move up the ladder, right? Who are some of the individual players that are jumping out at you the most? Again, we've talked about the AOE players, I think, but is there anybody, especially who wasn't maybe a big name in Spring Split, who's kind of on your radar as, hey, this person's got a real shot to earn their way into academy going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I know Peyton mentioned him earlier, but Array is actually, he's a pretty solid player. And with the support of Resolve, like inserting a rookie, quote unquote, even though he played for Supernova, into that sort of structure where the other 4 players have played together for a while, it's a healthy environment normally to develop and grow into, because you don't have a lot of pressure on you as an AD carry. You probably just have to show up and click heads, as they say. Besides that is like, I do have a lot of respect for Wixie. I think he's a huge win condition on Cloud9 Amateur. So he deserves a lot of praise. And I mean, I do want to shout out like Raheen and Pocket Rhino, who have been playing really well this split comparatively to how they might have showed in Proving Grounds at the end of last season. I think the last 2 series, they some people think they may have underperformed, but they're kind of like playing pretty well right now. So
yeah, for sure. I think bot lane is such an interesting one, right? Like you mentioned Array and Wixie and guys like that. And I think bot lane was the role in Spring that felt like this is where you've got the highest quantity of players worth watching, right? Like you don't just have a couple of junglers that you might be interested in. You've got like 5, 6 bot laners that are like, with the right set of developments, these guys could really come together. So you ended up having Danny move to LCS. You ended up having Team Luke move into Academy. Value obviously with what happened in Oregon, they're all kind of like scattered to the wind, so he's not playing. But are there still more bot laners you think filling that and keeping that kind of a bit of a stacked role in amateur, or has that kind of thinned out with all the player movements that have happened?
I mean, I think it's still a really strong role. I think Sketch Streams is pretty underrated by a lot of the analysts just because he played in Spring, but his team didn't do too well, and he really improved, like, I think, in between, and just like has a lot to show, I think. And then of course you can consider like players like Arrow and Gorica are still here. Like I know Gorica changed teams. Yeah. And then even Dig Mirage, they actually brought back Cow, who used to play on like Team Liquid Academy. Like he played TLA as AD and then support as well.
Yeah, I was saying, wasn't he a role swap?
Yeah, he started as AD, then went to support, but he's back to playing AD carry. So like, I'm kind of interested to see how like he might have to shake some rust off getting back into competitive after so long, but he's certainly interesting. And then obviously Shoryu replaces Luke and Danny as
Shoryu's been really
contenders.
Good.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, for the AD carry role, it's kind of like a revolving door right now. There's a lot of talent in the AD carry role.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the AD carry role and kind of the volume of talent there. We've got other positions where I think it's been a little thinner at the amateur level. I'd say, top lane, it's been a little bit hard to me to find big standouts. And we've talked a little about Faisal and how he fits into that. Was he playing in Spring or?
Yeah, he played on the same team as Sketch Dreams, which is Conviction. I don't know if they had a sun or a moon back then, but it was on Conviction.
Yeah, it's just the one team, I think.
They actually they only played in I think one of the tournaments, and they did pretty good, but pretty good is still like tough to break into the top 8 of last split because you still had Zeus.
Yeah.
No Org, Barrage, EGP. You know, you just had like a really solid top 7 or 8. So if you did really good, but you ran into one of those teams maybe in one of the last weeks, then you only got 10th or 11th. And unfortunately, playing in one tournament, it just doesn't qualify you for any other tournament. But
well, and it's so hard to get kind of noticed, I think, at the amateur level unless you go deep, right? Unless you get in several tournaments and go really far with it. So, I can understand that. I think it's interesting with top lane in amateur that it's so top heavy with experienced players, right? Like you have Alorum in there, you had Viper last split, you had, people like PCL who's been around for a long time in amateur, Dokla who's now back into academy, like these guys who have been around so much. It's really hard, I think, for an amateur top laner to stand out above that kind of group of players. So how do you think these top laners can actually get some recognition? Do you have to go out and try to smash these guys in lane and like take some names, or how do you break through as a top laner in amateur?
It's certainly tough because the public perception of top lane is like kind of a 1v1 solo kill. I'm gonna skill check you on every wave kind of role.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to the good top laners, they will beat you doing those things as well as beating you. And I'm gonna hold this freeze, call my jungler, and now your game's over because I killed you a single time because that's all they need to keep you down, right? And if you keep flipping 1v1s against them, it's gonna even if you have a 1 kill lead for the experienced top laners, they know how to absorb it, and then they might catch you making one mistake, and now the game's back in their favor again. So it's that constantly swinging back and forth, that situation where the experienced top laners just have a huge advantage, and it's basically they have to be as good as them in certain ways, whether that's laning, whether that's teleports, communication. You have to be better than them at one of those things at least, if not multiple.
Do you think it's an extension at all of the kinds of things that lead Alphari to stand out so much at the LCS level, while a player like Impact sometimes gets a little bit less credit? Like, do you think it's those kinds of things, and that we're seeing that similar kind of like, hey, if you smash them in lane and get solo kills, that is so much more noticeable and memorable than the player who loses the minimum in lane and then team fights super well, just to really boil it down, right? Or has the right teleports or whatever it is, or Fudge, like, who manages his waves to set up a gank really well, and that doesn't get noticed as much until it turns into solo kills later. Like, is that the kind of dynamic that you think applies in those kind of player comparisons as well?
Yeah, it's definitely that, as well as when you think about how you can approach like preparing for a team with like a Dokla, an Alorum, even a Brandini. These you approach draft and you say, well, top lane is not a win condition for our team because our top laner can't play against the other one, no matter the matchup. Like, you can give them the best matchup in the game. Well, that's the thing, right? You play Malphite, sit under your tower, go down 30, 40 creeps, and then you team fight later. But you're going to be looked at saying, well, you went down 30 creeps in lane. Like, you're not
that's
good.
Kind of the point.
But so that's just like a compound issue where some teams don't feel comfortable because every game is like, I got to win this game and I got to do the best thing to win this game, because they can't afford to experiment with like certain matchups or saying, oh, let's play towards our rookie top laner against Alorum this game and see how that goes, because they need to win every single game the best way that they think they can win. So those top laners, even if they could do that, they're also handicapped sometimes in preparation and draft in that aspect too, because it just isn't the smartest way for their team to win the game.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. On the jungling front, RBM, who are the junglers in amateur that you consider like closest rivals, or that you're trying to overcome, trying to learn from, that kind of thing?
I think, like you said, every single role is top heavy. There's just like a few players that just stand out so much more compared to every other player, and those are like the players that are like academy ready, because they're obviously too good to be playing in this league. And for jungle, it's kind of like Like I always think I'm like every player thinks they're better than like they actually are, right? So I think I'm the best, right? But like I think everyone else that's like really really good is like Fnatic, Winston, and Tomio. All four of us are really good.
For a
So
second there, I thought you might leave him out. I was.
yeah, I was
gonna have
trying
a
to.
comment.
I forgot the name. Tomio's. I think
Well, it's hard.
Tomio's,
It's hard because he's Meteos, but you're like, wait, but Meteos
Yeah.
playing under the name Tomio. I don't really get it. It's so hard to keep track.
I think he's overhyped by the community, but I think he is really good. He's also my favorite jungler to scrim against because he just does the most crazy things that I'm just like, bro, what is this guy doing? Like, there's no way he's even thinking about the game. He's just going next in his
Doing
head.
stuff.
Like, I love Tomio, and his streams are goated as well. His streams are goated.
Yeah, he's fun. Do you learn anything from that when he does these things? Like, does it seem like he's just trying something out, and maybe this will work and maybe it won't? And do you ever learn anything from that you want to try out yourself, or does it just end up feeling really random?
No, it's definitely just random. To learn stuff like that, I usually just watch like LPL and LCK. I'm trying to improve my routing. I learned a lot from Leota on like how to route better. So his last split, my like biggest flaw was like I wasn't that good at pathing and I didn't farm my camps very efficiently. But now I'm like good at it, and I still have good mechanics. It's like I don't know why that's what everyone says about me. It's just you have good mechanics. Like sure, like what does that mean?
Yeah.
But that's usually my upstart. So I just try to cover my flaws and then improve from there.
Who are some of the specific junglers that you watch that you've learned like a really interesting path from? Is there like a certain LPL jungler like, or like, hey, I watched Canyon and I learned this specific path from him or something like that? Any examples you can give?
Yeah, I'll give the first example was the number one thing that was like a cool little nitpick trick I learned was there's like these leaked pro views from MSI,
Yeah.
like on YouTube that are like 100 viewers and stuff like this. So I was like watching all those, and Canyon on Rumble when you have to like W mash level 1 to get the overheat, he clicks on the HUD and mashes W at the same time to make sure he never misses the W cast to get the overheat.
Make absolute fast as possible.
Yes, and no, I watched the LCS pro views. Not one jungler does it, so it's just I learned it from Canyon. I do it every game, so it feels cool. I'm doing this thing that no one else is doing. But like my favorite LPL jungler is definitely still Tarzan. I like back when he was in LCK, I like molded my whole idea of jungle and the game around how he played on Griffin. I think that was the name of the team back then. But
yeah,
I like molded the whole way I view jungle around him, like efficient pathing into like objective takes, stuff like this. Just playing the game like relatively slow, and it's like cool to see him evolving into a few more aggressive ideas because like it was their coach that kind of built Tarzan on Griffin, but he's like becoming a little bit more aggressive now that he's in LPL. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we don't need to go through every role. I think we talked about a lot of interesting players here.
They're all top heavy. Like
yeah, sure.
They're all top heavy. Like there's 4 or 5 players that are just like, wow, these guys are beasts. Mid lane is the same thing. Just 3 mid laners that are good. Everyone else is terrible. It's just how amateur works.
Well, this is an ongoing kind of running joke that we have in the Oracle's Elixir Discord about how you treat tier lists on this, and you've just executed it perfectly. That either you're the best or you're terrible.
Yes.
S tier is like best in the world. A tier is total garbage, not worthy of being a human being.
There's nothing you can do about it. It's like it just stinks because like those players need to be in academy. There needs to be like more spots or something, or they need to stop importing players that shouldn't be imported. Like these players should not be an amateur. They're just stomping on everyone. It's not fair. I've been lucky enough to have Dark Wings, but man, if I didn't have Dark Wings and I'm going against Dark Wings every game, I'm like, bro, what are we supposed to do?
So just to follow up on the one comment you said, who are the 3 mids that you would say at the top? I would assume, like, to my mind, it would right away look at Dark Wings and Doxa.
Doxa is not good, not that good. No, it's
you
like
consider them a top 3?
Dark Wings, APA, and Bradley. The CP Freeze guy. I think those guys are definitely top 3, and then like Doxa's 4th, just because Doxa's mechanically good. Like the rest of his TSM is like really bad, so I don't think Doxa will like get the showcase very much. But like I think Doxa is like really mechanically good, but he's kind of like held back.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has his niche that if you let him go on his melee assassins or whatever it is, you know, that he's going to perform a little differently on those than it is in some of the other champions. But I think that's something a lot of younger players often have to work on, right? And not just play Kha'Zix all the time. So, you know, one other thing I'd love to hear about from you guys is what it's kind of like, what the experience is as a player and amateur playing, you know, without the backing of a big org, without salaries and all that kind of stuff that you get at the academy level, right? Like, I think that's a big topic in NA is the existence of academy and every team having to have an academy team, and they pay these salaries, they provide, you know, kind of living space or whatever it is. The players in academy can focus full time on being League of Legends players and learning and trying to improve on that. And at the amateur level, I think, you know, there are a couple of orgs where you might get paid something that maybe you can live off of, maybe not. But generally speaking, you're doing this kind of as a hobby, right? Like, you have to still support yourself financially. What is that experience like when you have to balance this as just one part of your life and still kind of pay your bills? Pookar, as a coach, how are you able to kind of commit and stay in and do this?
Yeah, I mean, I work full time. You know, I have an 8 to 5 job. It means sometimes I'm late to some of the earlier scrims. It's also worth bringing up, I haven't spoken about Jalen or Julius, but he's my assistant coach, and he also works full time, and he's in the Pacific time zone. So sometimes it's like neither of us are at practice, and we just have to like give the players the best outline possible. And you know, we're around, but we're not like, we can't like give a lot of great feedback in those situations, right? So we have to maximize the rest of our situations with the players. But yeah, I work full time, and I mean, it's just about maximizing the time we have. And I mean, the advantage that the academy teams and maybe some of the amateur teams with LCS backing is just like, time is the biggest advantage that you can get. Like, the money is obviously important so you can support yourself, but having money also gives you, like, having time also gives you, like, it's a back and forth where if you have money you can have extra time because you don't have to work. And obviously some younger players have the advantage of, you know, having support from their parents, and some don't. So that's equally rough when you're on an amateur team that doesn't really have that ability to go full time with all of your players. And you know, we're only allowed to scrim 3 times a week and things like that. So
how much does it throw things off when you know, when you're not able to be there for full scrim blocks, like, to the extent that you're not just losing a certain percentage of your time there, right? Like, I imagine it can also throw off the overall flow of what you're doing. And if, like, I don't think it's as simple as an equation, I would assume, as I had to miss 20% of the practice so I could only provide 80% of the value of my coaching, right? It's more multiplicative to me. I would imagine, like, hey, might feel like I can only be half as effective as a coach if I'm not able to be there the entire time. Does it ever feel that way, or am I just extrapolating too aggressively?
No, it definitely feels that way, especially when a lot of the setup for a scrim block is kind of the first maybe 15 minutes of saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to focus on. And even if you type it out to the players, it's much more impactful to hear it, especially like, oh, we have to do this game. And even like, okay, draft's over, in between, like, this is what we have to remember to talk about in the game, guys. Like, we lose a lot of that. And especially like after the game, you know, we lose a coach's perspective on VOD review and mistakes on the game, where so when I miss scrims, I listen to the scrims, but I can't always watch them. So it's like, I can hear the mistakes, but I mean, I don't know if a situation was good or bad. It's just basically, I have to say, okay, you guys communicated about that really, really bad or really, really good. And unfortunately, that's just like, that's the way it is sometimes. You know, I'd rather have my team scrim a 5 block starting at 3 o'clock Eastern, and then me catch the back 3 of the games than only scrimming 3 games. Because, well, for one, I do trust a lot of the players on the team to lead reviews on their own. And if that wasn't the case, then it'd be a much more difficult situation where okay, my players aren't mature enough to talk to each other or comb through VOD review. Because one of the biggest problems in amateur and upcoming players is that the players focus a lot on sort of mechanical mistakes, like, oh, I didn't play this fight properly, instead of focusing on things like we didn't set up this fight properly, or we didn't get the necessary vision, or we didn't approach the fight from the right angle, right? So if you have players that can focus on those things, it really helps you as a coach, because you can have the player perspective also thinking in a less mechanical way, in a more, coach's mind, where it's not execution based, it's setup based. So that's very helpful for our situation.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what about from the player perspective on this, RBM? When you need to still be able to work a job and pay for your rent that way or whatever it is, how does that affect your ability to try to improve as a player and kind of reach that next level?
Yeah, it definitely makes it way harder. I would give anything to just go play Academy, just play League all day. That sounds so awesome. But like, instead, last split, I was still in college. And usually when I am playing, I'm in college. So I have like 15, 16 credit hours. And I'm like doing school full time. Like, you either have to, like right now I have 8 credit hours too in accelerated courses for my summer classes. So it's like, you either have to sacrifice one of the two things. You either sacrifice League for good grades, or you sacrifice good grades for League. And it's like kind of hard on like picking what you're supposed to do, right? So, and like how you're supposed to manage everything. I haven't had to work yet this summer, but I obviously have to, since I'm a college student. I have to pay for my school. So I'll have to get like a part-time job, and then again, it cuts times out of scrims at solo queue. Even though solo queue is not like the best practice, like it ruins scrim block hours, because like I have to work for a certain amount of time, like after my classes. So like how my schedule is gonna work is from like 12:40 to 3 I have class, and then from 3 till 7 I'm going to like have to work. So I don't even get to do anything till 7 p.m. and then that's when like scrim blocks will start, when the academy teams all scrim at 3 p.m. till like 8 p.m. EST, right? So we miss out on like the best scrim partners the days I'll like have to work and stuff like that. And it's like, you lose out on a lot of practice and development as a player, because you don't get to play as much. So obviously those players aren't really good. But if you are good and you have to do stuff like that, then it's like, wow, what can this guy do if he could invest into the game, right? Like for someone like me, where I have 15, 16 credit hours and I'm like good enough to be like a top 3 jungler and amateur, it's like, well, like imagine like that always just gets me so excited. It's like, imagine what I could actually do, right? Like if I could play Academy and just sit at a PC and play League 24/7, like I would just be crazy, right?
You took the training weights off.
Exactly. Like it sounds like a dream, like come true. It's like and I think that's why like people like they also want the younger players too, because they don't have to do anything. So like high school is like super easy and stuff. You don't work either, so it's like they get to play League a long time, because like high school gets out like 3 p.m. but like college, you go to class all day long on certain days. So
yeah, well, and again, I think there's a bit of a multiplicative effect there, where it's not just like I have a few hours per day to do this, so I have to reach 10,000 hours, and it's just going to take me longer to get there. Like, it doesn't work that way either, right? You have a certain amount, and it lowers the cap you're able to hit if you can't commit that hard to investing as much into it. And it's not going to take you an extra year to get there. You just might never get there if you have those limitations on you. So, I think there is that huge jump between being an amateur, if you're not 16, and being in academy and having to do this. Or, maybe you come from some kind of family background where you can be 21 and not have to have a job. But I think most people aren't coming from that, right? So
my parents are not happy whenever I don't have a job during the summer. They're not happy. So like you kind of just have to high roll, right? Like a player like Yunbi, for example, he wasn't allowed to pursue League till he finished university. That's why he didn't start on GGS till super late. His parents wouldn't let him. So it's just stuff like this. Like you have to RNG, your parents support what you want to do, and you have to RNG like being good enough within like your 3 hours of playing the game every day. It's like it's not fair.
How does all of this factor into, or sorry, and before we move on the topic, I do want to give you a chance because I think you might want to revise an earlier statement about the top end mid laners.
Oh, great.
Yes, before you get too much hatred.
I forgot Tuesday. Busy was right. I forgot Tuesday. Tuesday is the second best mid. It's Darkwings and Tuesday, and then whoever else I said second before. So.
APA and Bradley, you said.
Oh, APA, yeah. He actually improved a lot this split too. And Resolve isn't the worst team to scrim in the world like they were last split. Last split, scrimming them, it was a complete waste of time. But this split, they're like trying and scrim stuff. So. I love those guys though.
So we saved that one. Everything's okay again. But like, how does all of this with like time limitations, and so on, how does that factor into the way you approach the game and the kind of strategies you bring out? Like, does it incentivize more working with pocket picks and working with comfort zones, rather than being a little more experimental and like trying to adapt to every new meta change as it comes? Like, does that change the way you approach the game in general, Pookar?
Yeah, so another comparison to Zeus is basically based on the schedule that we had to play in the spring, we basically had to scrim to win every single match. Like, our point of scrims was to refine our play style in the way that it was going to win the next match, like every single week. So we used our 2 or 3 scrims that week to try and figure out how to win and win as a team. We were only able to basically do one style and just keep doing that style over and over.
Yeah.
But I've made it a point on this roster to basically, it's definitely a longer season and a more drawn out with more room to experiment and scrim different things. So I'm trying to open everything up, and basically sometimes you can get ahead of the meta, sometimes you can fall behind the meta. Unfortunately for amateurs, actually we're going to be playing on 11-13 next week, which obviously has no pro games played on it, but also has been having, basically, Riot's been changing the game a lot every patch since the end of the summer. So it's basically, basically it's trying to figure out what's best on the patch without having any pro teams having any influence on what you think you should be playing. So
they'll be learning from you.
Yeah, I wish.
So some of these changes, and this actually fits in with, we can take a little time here to take some questions from listeners, and people are able to submit these questions in advance on patreon.com/oracleselixir. But Incon wanted to know, and maybe he's just trying to scout you guys and learn from you, so you might want to be careful the way you answer. But he's kind of wondering what you think of with these meta changes, with the new items, all the the reduced mobility on some of the active items, the mage items all being changed around, the new split push items, things like that. Where do you think the meta is headed with all that? Is split push going to become a viable strategy? Are control mages going to have a big resurgence?
I think I think both of those things can be true. Obviously, if you're getting into top lane and getting a lot of split pushers like Fiora, Camille, even stuff like Yorick or maybe Tryndamere, stuff like that, it's like if you have a player that can play those champions and it get to deeper in the draft where you can hide it and then just pull it out, enemy doesn't have an answer for it, it's tough. And then with the mage changes, I think there's going to be some interesting jungle and bot lane picks with these mage changes, because a lot of the big problem with the mages was the item cost. So it's going to help a little bit. I don't know if we're going to go back to Orianna, Victor, Azir meta. I don't know if Riot wants that.
Please
but
no.
I think there's going to be some interesting bot lane picks and some interesting top lane picks. These items are not necessarily going to open the game up a lot, but it's going to be kind of a can your team abuse this and play around it the right way? I might be wrong, and it might just be so broken that you don't have to do anything different, and you just like both top laners build this item and the minions just hit each other for 10 minutes while neither wave moves. But I mean, we'll just have to see, right? Because especially the mobility changes, is a lot of people are focusing on the 2 new items, but the mobility changes, like, it can open up a lot of different champions that were kind of gatekept because the other champions just jumping on them too easily. So
from the jungle perspective, RBM, if split pushers in the top lane become kind of the maybe either the primary way to play or just like a viable secondary way to play. How does that affect the jungle pool indirectly? Like what kinds of champions become more valuable in a heavy split pushing meta?
Champions that are strong in 2-2-1 or one, like those kind of scenarios, 2-2-1 scenarios,
So like
1-3-1
disengage.
scenarios where you're kind of like fighters or like hard engage, so you
Okay.
can like engage deep in the side. So like stuff like Nocturne is like the most OP jump when it comes to that because it turns off the lights. So yeah, like the other people can't collapse onto your side lane play. Something like Zac, because you can engage from 6 billion screens away. Sejuani, because the melee split pusher, you instantly proc stun. Like those champs are also like already last patch they were good. Like I played Sejuani in one of the series too. Like, and then they got the new item that like you can like attach as like is like old Poppy R before Poppy got reworked, where like you pick someone and you take less damage from them. So it's like stuff like that is gig OP. This patch I think will be fine. As well as champion like Rumble, you can just ulti from 10,000 screens away. Like jungle didn't change too much, but some champions are better with this new Stride Breaker now. Like this item is so OP. It's because the item needs to get nerfed already. Like they need to make it so it doesn't deal or it doesn't scale off total AD. The item scales off your total AD. So champions like Xin that'll get like 300 AD if you build like Stride Breaker, Sterix, like like DD or something like this. You're gonna one-shot people with it. Like the item's so OP. Kha'Zix as well as Giga OP with Stride Breaker. So I hope champions like that will open up more because Kha'Zix is already pretty decent. But with Stride Breaker, I think the champion will be like Giga OP, and then maybe I can get like a ban every series.
That would be it'd be fun to watch. I think any kind of melee assassins from any role is always a lot of fun to watch for sure. Cool. Well, that's very interesting to hear about. I think a lot of people are going to be waiting to see where this meta goes. And I think, especially given that there have been adjustments in multiple areas, we could have these different areas don't necessarily complement one another, right? Like being able to build an OP Kha'Zix in the jungle doesn't necessarily fit with having a hard split pushing top laner. Like maybe there's some scenarios where you could put that together, but it's kind of, and then if control mages come up, that can fit in also, but you're not going to get like any kind of 1-3-1 approaches out of that really. So, seeing which of those different like pieces rises up above the other ones, I think will be very fascinating to kind of find out, because I'm sure they'll be tried. different approaches will be tried, and then which ones actually kind of prevail. We'll see on that front. Before we wrap things up here, we've gone pretty much the entire episode without talking about Team Liquid, but it is the big news of the day, and I'm curious what you guys think about it. So the news that came out, just, they scheduled their press conference after I had already announced the time we were doing the podcast, so I kind of took it as a bit of a slap in the face, but, I'll have to talk to their PR people afterwards. No, I'm just kidding. So the big news was Jat has resigned at head coach and completely departed Team Liquid. He's not in the org anymore. Cold is going to be the interim head coach, and then their two-way coach, Hax Defender, who had been kind of like aligning their approaches between LCS and Academy team. That was his role. He's going to be the assistant coach for LCS. And then the other piece of news was that Santorin is still struggling with the health issues that he had at the end of Spring Split, where he had to miss the semis and the finals. And he's decided to try to deal with this. He's going to take some time away. So, so Mayo is going to be into the LCS, they say, for at least this coming weekend. So the June 25th, 6th, 7th weekend. And, potentially afterwards that. And then they just noted as well, Afari is still on a personal break, whatever that means, for a few more days. Jenkins is going to keep starting for now. Things may still change on that front, but we'll have to see. So on, which part of this, there's so much to tease apart here, but like from the coaching standpoint, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Pookar? Do you think if you suddenly take one of those coaches out, is that a hard thing to react to in your experience? If you have like a multi-person coaching team, what would you kind of expect from TL out of this?
Well, it obviously the staff. I mean, I think Cold is new and Hax Defender's kind of new to this season, but Jat did pick both of them to join his kind of staff. He obviously joined last year and had to work with whatever TL had to give him. But now that he built his staff, it's kind of like when you remove one out of three of those staff members, it could shake things up. but it is important to have like the right staff member for the right roster. So Chat may have been the right head coach for last year's Team Liquid, but with the introduction of Alfari, it may have shifted that to where, maybe Santorin isn't the right jungler for Alfari. Maybe because I think a big fan perception is that you have to have the best player in every single role in order to be the best team in the league. But really, you need the players that work best together on the same team. So if you have 3 dominant lanes like Team Liquid can, you don't need a Santorin in the jungle to carry you every single game, especially if you're just going to be putting them on like the Udyr or the supportive junglers, right? You want a jungler that can be kind of called around inside the game to be where the laners want him to be. And at that point, it's just deciding which lane to help out. But, that's how I see it is that if sometimes a head coach can be good, but it doesn't fit the players that are on the roster, which is a big problem in esports because, the players are really important. It's hard to replace a player. So,
yeah. Well, and of course, there was all the drama around it where, we're not going to get into it, but, people will make a lot of assumptions or go on the partial information or the reports or the rumors that are out there and say, this may have happened, or maybe it was that, or decide that they confidently know exactly what happened because some other person told them so, and so now they're the experts. But, if there is just conflict, right, and that can come from not being the right fit between the coach and the players. And if that leads to the kind of a conflict that can't be managed in a healthy way, then that can lead to this as well. What in terms of drafting, I think that's something that the community ends up having a certain perspective on. Like, this coach is up, the drafts are going this way, it is all that coach's fault, kind of thing. And as a coach yourself, and someone who I'm sure does contribute to drafting, how have you ever been on a team where the players just sat there and the coach told them pick this, ban this, the end?
I haven't, because I normally come in with
of
a plan.
Any?
There definitely have to some that exist in amateur, because some players just like, I'm not going to play this pick ever, right? Like, even if you've scrimmed it all week, you come to match day and you're like, nah, I'm not picking this, man. It's not good here. I want to pick R5 every game. And if you have 3 players who always want to pick on R5 every single game you're on red side, you're just going to end up with like, oh, I have to blind this champion. And then you weren't prepared necessarily to blind that champion, right? But if you there are ways to get around that where you can ask the players like, hey, we have to pick this, or this on this slot, right? You have to pick one, and it will change the plan of the rest of the draft, but that's what you have to work with, right? And obviously on an LCS level, it's probably a lot more difficult than that to convince the players to blind pick some of their champions, but especially in this meta, you have to blind pick certain champions, and you just have to live with what the enemy is going to counterpick it. You have to have a plan for it. So,
yeah, fair enough. On the jungler side of it, with Santorin stepping back, RBM as a jungler yourself, what are your opinions of Armeo? And I'm sure you at some point have scrimmed against him or know some things about him. Maybe you don't, but what are your kind of opinions on him and his ability to kind of step in here again? Of course, we saw it a little bit last split, but
yeah. Can I touch on the coaching thing first, though?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. There, as a player, so this is taking the rumors into account. There is nothing more frustrating than being told something that you know is wrong, and you have to just listen to it because it's your coach. And some players are really, really bad at that. Like, I used to be abysmally bad. Like, at MSU, I had a huge ego, and if I knew it was wrong, I would just get mad that I'm being told it. And if you're in LCS and that's still happening, I could not imagine, right? So if that kind of stuff is what's happening, like, Alfari would met the boom, and I would met the boom, and I know other academy players that have the same problem, that they're being told things that they know is wrong, but since the the community and the league and the system kind of works you have to respect your coaches no matter what, even if what they're saying is wrong, which is totally correct. You should always respect everyone you work with, but it's hard, right? So that's my take on that. Is at a point it does become player versus coach, and whichever one you need more, and it's always player because the coach is just like a cog, right? Like in the machine, we can just replace it with everyone else. Like especially in amateur, like back in the day, amateur coaches was just, do you have Discord installed? Yes. All right, you can coach. Like it was bad.
Maybe I qualify.
Yes, like back in the day it was rough. But for the jungle perspective, Armeo, playing against Armeo, if you make a pathing mistake or you go for a play that's like not entirely efficient, he'll always punish you for it, for sure. Say, for example, you stay too long for a bot lane gank with your topside camps respawning, you're going to lose your topside camps no matter what. 100% guaranteed. And if they wait off that bot lane gank, you're going to get pretty behind, right? Armeo is like one of the most efficient players and one of the best at understanding, okay, since you did this, I'm going to do this. He thinks on his feet really, really fast. And that's something I need to work on and get a little bit better at personally. So I look up to Armeo for being really good at that. As well as I just think he's a really good player. He's definitely going to be at least a middle of the pack LCS player. He also gets to play with great players as well. TL is full of a super stacked roster. Even like Bob Jenkins is super, super, super good. And he draws like such unique draft scenarios because at a point you should just play around what you have and what your strengths are. In amateur, you should do it all the time, like we talked about earlier, because you don't have the time to put in, the resources to be able to play multiple ways. Like Zeus could only team fight last, but you didn't, like there's one identity. So I think Jenkins brings a unique aspects to TL that we have to be scared of. What if he just randomly picks Kennen or Lulu? Like, and he's the best two Kennen or Lulu players on the whole server, right? So it's like, well, we can never do the enchanter trade. We always have to ban one or the other, or both in some cases. And we can't get weird scenarios where Kennen just destroys our whole draft, because Kennen has some good lane matchups.
Yeah.
So Armeo will thrive, do well, it'll be middle of the pack. He's my boy. I look up to him a lot for sure. Yeah. So I think players that make pathing mistakes like that or try to be like crazy aggressive, which exists more in Academy than LCS, are going to get punished a lot. So he'll do well.
Team Liquid will certainly be hoping that he can find some success, and whether or not Alfari comes back in a week or two, I think they'll shift things around. We'll see whether the coaching staff there adjusts anything about the way they're approaching stuff, and a lot of moving pieces to find out how the Team Liquid organization moves forward, and also if Alfari does come back, then do they hold on to Dokla for the rest of the split and continue paying him, or let him go back to amateur and put Jenkins back in the academy? What's going to happen with all that? We will find out, I suppose. But this has been a great time. Thanks very much for joining me on the show today, guys. Pookar, what is the best way for people to follow you and your work?
I haven't been tweeting as much as maybe I should for my hashtag personal brand, but I'm always on Twitter reading stuff, and I'm on Discord and the various channels, servers that people frequent. So.
And RBM, how can people follow you the best way? You have a Twitter link, a stream link?
Yeah, my Twitter and Twitch are both LOL RBM. Follow those. My streams are bangers, for sure. I love my stream. It's so fun to stream as well. So, but I don't want to be a content creator. Chill. The scouts need to chill. I need to play. I don't want to make content.
Good. Well, hopefully people will follow that, and even if your goal is primarily to be a competitive player, we'll still support that stream. I'll make sure links for those are in the show notes. And thank you to everyone who's listening, and you guys can support the TrueSight podcast at patreon.com/OraclesElixir. Subscribe to the show on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as anchor.fm/TrueSight. And make sure you check out the Orcs Elixir Discord server, talk about League of Legends esports, data science, traditional sports, other topics like that. Links for all of those will be in the show notes as well. This has been the TrueSight podcast, and I'm Tim Sevenhusen. Thanks for listening.